Hello, good evening. Welcome to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, and today on the show I'm joined by Tina Carmelia, a science communicator and journalist, as well as Gurmeet Singh, chairman of the Centre for Environment, Technology and Development Malaysia, better known as CETDEM. Welcome guys to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be looking at the year in terms of Malaysia's progress or lack thereof in addressing some of the environmental issues that have come to the fore in 2019. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to start with you, Gurmeet. In your assessment of the Malaysian government's progress this year in terms of addressing environmental issues.
I don't think that much has been done. They've been only talking about having laws and doing this, amending the Environmental Quality Act. But in terms of actual enforcement, what matters on the ground, nothing really very much has progressed. Sungai Kim was a sort of disgrace sort of thing, in my opinion.
Right.
But it reflected what has been going on all along, the lack of enforcement.
Well, Sungai Kim was a big issue,
Yeah.
Pasir Gudang as well. Tina, what were some of the biggest environmental issues that struck you this year?
I think the youth activism movement really took off in the past year or so, and I think that there's a lot of discomfort that came out of it, especially with the more traditional status quo type of people. But I think that every now and then a good reminder of this childlike idealism when it comes to such a cynical subject as the climate crisis is important for the older people like us who've been doing it for a while and bogged down by
jaded and no longer
exactly.
idealistic. Well, you said discomfort,
Yeah.
that youth activism had actually triggered some discomfort. What did you mean by that?
I think a lot of people prefer to have tangible outcomes with the climate action. You want something that's instant, you want a silver bullet type of answer. And with youth activism, with street protests, it seemed like it's just noise. You don't see a tangible result from it. So you say things like the kids should stay in school. You say things like they're puppets for everything from Soros to ISIS to Antifa, right? And you can never win. They're not going to win. It's the same with Malala Yousafzai and her education activism. So it's one of those things where it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. So do it anyway.
What did you think about that? I mean,
Well, I thought it was progress at last. The youth was moving a bit.
Okay.
But as Rita pointed out, I'm not too sure whether they're getting very far. But what I'd like to see is a build-up on that they will really translate into actual action. But they also tend to oversimplify because some of them address plastic pollution as part of climate change issues. Then they bring all sorts of issues in and they're talking about climate change.
okay, so
They don't really seem to realize what are the root causes of climate change and what is really preventing action. It's basically government inertia. A lot of vested interests are at stake. There's oil majors are at stake. And there's a whole lot of economics and political forces at stake because I followed the climate negotiation right before they began, even before the convention was started in 1992.
In Rio.
And I was there in New York when they adopted the convention and Malaysia said we won't join. So I look at it with cynicism and I think the world has only now beginning to realize a little bit. But it is rather overlaid and I'm pessimistic actually about the whole thing.
okay, well, you brought up a couple of interesting things. So break it down for us. You said that sometimes in the conversation about climate change, we kind of confuse matters, we lump it all. Then break it down. I mean, what are some of the streams of communication that we should get clear? Climate change, plastic pollution does not come into that, separate issues. So perhaps you can clarify some of the misconceptions that we're having in our everyday conversations about the environment, about climate change. Do you want to start, Gurmeet?
Well, basically, I think with the climate change, they should actually look at the root causes. They tend to oversimplify, as I said, the plastic part. And they also oversimplify by saying, oh, if I recycle more, I'm doing something for the environment. I say, recycle what? What are you going to recycle? If you are cutting down your energy use, yes, you are doing something on your use. If you are driving less, you are doing something about it. But doing recycling of plastic or recycling your clothes doesn't produce climate change.
So it
may be distant, very, very remote, but it's not directly related. Then the other myth is about becoming vegetarian. The vegetarians seem to have oversimplified the situation. They claim that you can cut down 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions. There's no way. I've seen all the scientific evidence that in fact 70%, almost 60% is from energy use, and then the rest are from cutting of forests, waste disposal, chemicals and all this sort of thing. So no way can you, by switching to say chicken burgers and meat burgers, actually help really solve the issue.
So, okay, so Tina, what do you think about that? I mean, have we oversimplified the conversations around climate change? You are a science communicator. It's difficult to communicate the life cycle when you talk about products and all that and where it falls into the economy, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a complicated issue, not just because of the science, not just because it's the climate science that's complicated. It's also with the negotiations. It's also the legalese that
Right.
you know, that's involved. The square brackets, where you have hundreds of square brackets in the Paris Agreement that needed
What's a
to.
square bracket?
Square bracket means a disagreement.
Yes. So simple words like the parties shall in square brackets, or the parties should in square brackets. And the connotation with shall versus should matters to the
lawyers.
parties. And that's democracy for you. That's the democratic process
Wow.
behind the climate negotiations. So yes, when we communicate this, when we do climate communication, it's hard to touch on every single element of it, because you cannot do it in a single conversation. You cannot do it in a single program, in a single documentary. It's an ongoing conversation, and there will be elements of it, whether it's plastic. It's so far down the chain, but you can link it back to the oil and gas industry, the petrochemical industry that's produces the raw materials for plastics, for example, and the oil and gases. The industries linked to the climate change or carbon emission.
Okay.
But it's a very long
Chain.
yes,
Yeah,
chain.
it's a long chain.
So, but when it comes to individual action, I know that it seems so unfair.
Yeah.
Right, that the responsibility is passed down to you, especially when you don't know what's going on. You know? But it's like doing your taxes. Most of us don't know half of the things that we're doing when we're filing our taxes, but we do it anyway because
True, because we have to.
it's our responsibility.
That's right. Okay, that's a really good analogy to end on. We're going to come back after this quick break and continue our discussion on the year of 2019 in terms of environmental issues. Stay tuned to Consider This. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, and I'm chatting today to Gurmit Singh and Tina Carmelia about environmental issues affecting the world and Malaysia in this year. Now, this year has been really big for Greta Thunberg, hasn't it? And I'm just wondering, I mean, we touched a little bit on youth activism before the break, and I guess zooming out to the world globally, she really has become the poster child for climate change activism. Now, I want to get your thoughts, both of you, on the Greta Thunberg effect, whether you think her activism has actually changed the narrative around climate change, has actually pushed for tangible action or tangible results. Gurmit, what do you think?
Well, we were trying for a long time. In fact, I have actually given up the negotiators, and I was trying for a long time for a people's movement against climate change. In a way, she has provided the momentum. But the question is whether she can continue on it and build up on this. Will the people continue to support? Because this is not a one-off thing. You have to maybe be at least for a few years. And I am a little bit, not pessimistic, would say maybe optimistic. I'm
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay,
That she will provide the momentum at least every Friday, happening elsewhere. And so far it has continued. I hope she can build up on that. And other people, the adults, need to come onto it, because the youth alone can't do very much.
well, you know, you mentioned a bit earlier that you've been doing this for a while.
40 years.
I didn't want to say it, but I'm glad that you did. So I'm just wondering, why now? Or is this a re-emergence of, you know, a new sense of urgency when it comes to climate change?
I think it's basically the urgency, because
Okay.
they have already said, even the negotiators have agreed, the IPCC have said, you have this window, narrow opportunity of 1.5 degrees centigrade, you have at the most 5 years. The scientists were saying all these things even in the 90s. Huh? They were even saying that, but people ignored them because they said the science was not sure. But now it is very, very evident, and even Bush cannot deny it, the great denier. So I think there's a sense of urgency about it.
Tina, what do you think Greta Thunberg has gotten right in her approach to creating this ripple effect?
I think she uses her privilege well. She
Oh.
comes from a very privileged position
Okay.
as a Swede. She gets a lot of coverage. She can amplify the message because, and I think she's acknowledged her privilege a number of times as well. And I think if you see the ripple effect, it's maybe not a tangible answer to the climate crisis, but you know, even 2 or 3 years ago, you don't get a lot of contact with climate news. Today, every single day, you have contact with climate news, whether passively or actively. Just scrolling on your social media timeline,
Right.
you get some contact with climate news.
Well,
And
give me an
this-
example of how we have this contact passively. What kind of news are you talking about?
You just have to scroll on your social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook. There's
So what
a-
kind of news, for instance? The passively contact.
You get a lot of coverage about Greta Thunberg, both the positive and the negative.
Sure.
You get people calling her names or telling her to stay in school. But that creates conversation. It always starts with a conversation. You're not going to get the answer, because if we have the answer, we won't be having this conversation at all, right? But ideas, it starts with a conversation, I think.
So where do you think Malaysia needs to up its game, Gurmit? I mean, is it in terms of government policy? Because you talked a little bit earlier about the real reason is government inertia. And I wonder whether I disagree with that, because I'm not sure that government policy is the only holy grail for environmental reform. Looking at Greta Thunberg, I wonder whether it's more of an on-the-ground grassroots movement. Do you
but
still think
yes
it's government?
And no, I would say. Because I think the political will has to be there. And in this country, whether you like it or not, political will matters. And so far, the Prime Minister has held all sorts of contradictory things on environment and climate and all that. Some positive, some negative. He uses the word sustainable very glibly nowadays. I don't know whether they understand what they mean by sustainability. But I actually set them pushes for sustainability, actually. We look at all the problems within the sustainability context. We call ourselves promoting sustainable solutions. And we find that there is the understanding is lacking. There is some initial understanding beginning, but it is not deep enough
Understanding
of what even sustainability is.
within the government or within
it.
policymakers?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I attend a lot of meetings of the government, the EPU, the MEA. And
Mestec.
Mestec.
Okay.
Mestec, only on climate change, basically. Somehow Yo has been a disappointment to me.
Oh.
You used to be very close when she was out, not a minister. Now she doesn't even want to meet me. So I'm just wondering what was the reason.
Probably busy. Well, actually, can I press you on that? And I'm wondering, looking at the Pakatan Harapan government's track record in terms of the environment, we have had some big environmental disasters, the haze and all that this year. It seems like they seem to be proactive. But when it comes to climate change, do you disagree?
I would say proactive only to some extent.
Okay. Well, maybe proactive is the wrong word.
What proactive?
Reactive.
Reactive. I was gonna say, yes.
Reactive is probably the
They're not
better word.
proactive.
But if we were to focus on climate change,
But climate change, you see, the thing is, other than renewable energy, where she's talking of basically solar energy, government's commitment to 20% renewable energy, means basically the old government also had the same commitment in its Green Technology Master Plan. So hers is a little bit, she's parroting the Pakatan thing, which is a little bit more, 5% more. But I think she hasn't set up a target to say, when are we going to phase out coal-fired power stations? Or when are we going to stop investing in coal-fired power stations? And she has not said anywhere, when are we going to be carbon neutral? I would like to see that sort of statement.
is that too far of a leap? I mean,
No, you must do it now.
What about you, Tina? Weigh in on this.
I don't think it is a problem that's unique to Malaysia. I think a lot of countries are reluctant to
Make that step.
to make such a
Okay.
commitment,
Okay.
because once you make such a promise, you have to you be held accountable for it, and it's a political thing, right?
But beyond that, you can't do anything because anything else is all playing around.
Yeah. So there's no movement politically. It's just,
It's words. You
Yes.
see, even at the deputy minister went up to Madrid. What did she say? She repeated the same mantra: 45%. We will achieve this. We have turned to solar energy. Beyond that, nothing.
Okay, so if everyone is concerned about the inertia and the kind of political spiel that happens at these big conferences, much like what Greta Thunberg said, the UN is not doing enough in terms of climate change. So where is it going to come from? Is it going to come from the grassroots?
Grassroots. It
Okay,
has
and
to
this
come
is
from
where
grassroots.
environmental communication is more than important. We're going to come back, continue this conversation, what it takes to get the grassroots moving. That's coming up next on Consider This. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us on Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. I'm speaking tonight to Gurmit Singh, Chairman of the Centre for Environment Technology and Development Malaysia, CETDEM, as well as Tina Carmelia, science journalist and science communicator. And I want to throw this question to you, Tina, because at the end of the day, if we're trying to get, trying to rally the troops, it's important that we have the conversations right. And a large part of that is the media, right? Is the media creating the right narratives in the conversation about climate change and environmental awareness? Where do you see some of the gaps?
I think we are slowly moving towards that direction.
Okay.
If I could quote a couple of examples.
Sure.
For example, the BBC only last year decided through a staff briefing that to have a conversation about climate change, you don't need to have a climate denier. Only last year.
Because the BBC has something called they have to have two sides.
Impartiality.
But
But that's,
two sides of
that's
the
creating
story.
false balance. And I
Yeah.
think every journalist
Yes.
in journalism school learn about false balance.
Yeah, so you
So it
can't have
only
a climate change scientist next to a climate science denier.
Correct,
right?
because the science is clear. And what they in their briefing to the staff, they said that it's like football. If Manchester United won 2-0 last Sunday, you don't need a denier to deny the scoreline, right? So if the science is clear, then the science is clear. The Guardian has also made some several changes to the editorial policies around climate change. They have chosen stronger words like using climate crisis,
Right.
climate breakdown, climate emergency, rather than climate change.
Because semantics are important.
Correct.
That's how we change the conversation.
Exactly.
Gurmit, where do you see the gaps, especially in local media reporting? I just want to point out to Malaysia Kini's excellent report on Sungai Kim Kim, which I thought was fantastic. This is a long-form piece, data-driven, a multimedia composition by Malaysia Kini, and really highlighted the issue of the lapses in environmental protection within that area. What about your assessment of what the media has been doing this year?
Generally, the media has been bad on the
Ooh.
environment. I remember
Sorry.
all the days of the BN that I was blacked out when we were depending on mainstream media. It's only social media appearing on the scene that has broken through the thing, that has actually made the difference. And I agree with Malaysia Kini, but one thing on Sungai Kim Kim, I found that they really didn't address the issue was, why was it that only the children on the second floor onwards were being affected? The children down below were not being affected by the air pollution. And all these people were doing measurements at the ground level. There was something wrong. I still think nobody has been able to answer my question on Sungai Kim Kim. Why were children who were being hospitalized and all that from the second floor onwards of the school?
What do you
I
hypothesize?
suspect there must have been a gas lighter than air, which they were not monitoring.
Okay, well,
Things like that. They should raise that issue. itself. But that struck me as odd. I asked the director, one of the ex-DOE people also, he couldn't answer me the question.
Is it difficult to get data and information and
This
answers?
has been the biggest problem in Malaysia
Is that
all my life.
Okay,
Yes,
which
even
one?
outside of Malaysia, I've covered the COP, I've covered the several UN conventions, and chasing after the Malaysian delegation for comments is an impossible task.
Why is that so difficult? Why is it so sensitive?
OSA, the OSA, I mean, totally opposed to the OSA. It should be done away with because everything
that's
is in
fair.
the OSA.
I mean, there are state secrets and there are state secrets, right? So this isn't. This is for the benefit
Mahathir
for people.
himself has said you have a right to Information Act.
Exactly, Freedom of Information
Freedom
Act.
of Information Act.
And so, what are we missing when we don't have the information?
Then you make the wrong decisions.
Exactly.
Or you make decisions blindly.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I've been groping blindly right from the first day when I identified pollution in the Klang River. Nobody took it up for a long time.
Right.
That was 1975. And they didn't release any government report. And the university is only starting studying it 10 years after the road.
Is there a distrust of the data? I mean, like whatever data we have right now, is there a certain level of distrust?
I generally don't trust government data.
Okay. And then, so without it, what do we have then? I mean, unless independent researchers fork out an enormous amount of money to collect this data, it's going to be difficult for us to have any kind of data. So I think maybe, at the end of the day, looking at working with government agencies and explaining the use of data for evidence-based policy making.
I think that's becoming now the sort of norm. They're trying to put data on
Correct,
the
yeah.
website. Even when they produced the national report, they had problems getting data from each other.
Yeah.
Because, for example, Petronas wouldn't give his oil data unless they had a letter from the minister.
Oh.
And this was all the national accounting.
Okay.
So even the other day, PJ complaining that they cannot get electricity use data from TNB, where they wanted to produce again the baseline also. So this problem will keep on going on, and so I think we have to keep on tackling. We have to get the data. There are efforts now being made, but I'm very distrustful of the speed at which.
One thing that has struck me is that for many of us, the climate change conversation is almost always tinged with some kind of pessimism and the cynical outlook that we can't do this. This party is not playing its role. This other party is not playing its role. All the while the world is burning around us. When we're trying to communicate that, how do we not lose that sense of hope that we're actually doing this, or we're fighting a fight that perhaps we can win? Tina, do you find that it's the conversation often becomes pessimistic?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that within the environmental journalism network we also recognize that, because we see our colleagues, especially the much more the more veteran ones,
who's been fighting for 40 years,
burning out or just they go into eco-anxiety, eco-depression, right? Which are because this general pessimism around the future of the planet, and I think. We're now trying to focus more on solution-based journalism. When we cover environmental stories, when we cover climate stories, yes, you're calling out the people responsible, the parties responsible. You are showing the gaps in the knowledge, the gaps in the action, but you're also focusing on the positive, on the solutions that some people have tried to come up with. And I think that that's a good balance. I mean, we don't have the silver bullet answer, we don't, but at least some focus on hope.
So,
and you see, SETDEM itself tries, we are set up organized, we don't campaign actually.
Okay.
We basically provide solutions. The first solution we provide is organic farming. We set up an organic farm and demonstrated its viability. Then we, on a house, we took our terrace house and made it energy efficient.
Oh, nice, okay.
And we produced solar panel, insulated the roof and all that. So we have sustainable solutions. And the trouble is the pickup is not there. We are disappointed with the pickup.
Pickup of the wider population in terms of
the number of people going with organic, government supporting organic, the energy efficient house. People come and look at the house, yes, they don't go back and do anything because we retrofitted it for 100,000, which is the sort of price that my neighbors spend on renovating the house.
Renovating houses anyway. Okay.
So we basically have been trying to do that,
All right.
but it's quite tough.
What do you foresee as being a catalyst to pick up? Is it just better awareness? Do we need a campaign around this, or
A
just
mixture,
top-down government
mixture,
support?
Mixture. We have to try everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we do because with climate stories, the problem with the climate crisis is that it's a slow burning issue. So it becomes like the frog in the boiling water. No, you
You don't feel the temperature getting hotter, right?
comfortably, in this nice warm jacuzzi. You
Right.
think, right? And here comes young Greta Thunberg poking you with a spatula, saying, "Save yourself, save yourself," and you feel that, why are you?
Why should I? Right?
Yeah, because I'm really comfortable right now. Not realizing, not peeking out of the pot, seeing the temperature rising, to do anything about it, because it's a slow burning issue.
But also, I think what has happened is now the evidence is becoming more clear, because weather extremes are very evident now.
Yeah.
And then weather extremes are the examples we were looking for. I remember 15 years ago when I went around the country talking about climate change, I couldn't give very many examples.
Yeah.
Oh.
People asked me to give what examples.
Of-
Now at least I can point to the weather changes, the
Okay.
floods, the
Yeah, I mean,
droughts.
we can see this happening as we
Exactly.
read the news
So
as
I
well.
think weather, climate is becoming obvious now, climate change.
It's unfortunate that has to come to this
No.
point before people start realizing that.
Believing
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But now at least we have moved, so that is why I'm still in the game.
And I hope you remain in the game, both of you. Thank you so much for all the good work that you've done and for being on the show today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I'm Melisa Idris. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on this episode of Consider This, but I will be back with you same time tomorrow. I'll catch you then. Thank you for watching and good night.